Now, welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to the spook season. I was thinking perhaps it's time we had a little bedtime story. After all, this is the season that the spooks come out. Correct. The creepy, creepy ghouls. So tonight, I have a bedtime story for you. All about leather gloves. Shall we begin? I hope you're sitting comfortably. There are, of course, more explicit, gruesome stories on my OnlyFans, if you're brave enough. Jane fell out of the bar, rolling down the street. She had been away for 3 days now on the most wonderful trip of self-exploration. She just needed a couple of days away from her usual day-to-day grind and had chosen Brighton. Brighton was one of her favourite places in the world to visit. The streets, cobbled, the beautiful antique and curiosity shops, all hidden in the tiny little lanes behind all the drama of the seafront. She stumbled down the lane, thinking to herself, could she remember where she was staying? It was one of those Airbnbs, but which way had she come from? Cold air hit her face, and the alcohol seemed to suddenly increase in volume. Her mind became hazy, and she felt a little unsteady on her feet. The streets were quiet. Why was it so quiet? What time was it? She looked down. Where was her phone? She just felt so tired. All she wanted to do was go home and rest. She began to stroll aimlessly down the streets, looking in each window, fascinated by all the wonderful curiosity. She loved antiques and had spent most of her day wandering around the streets. She wondered how pretty it would look at night, and she was right. Each window, lit from behind, with all the sparkling beauties, she felt like a magpie drawn to each one. Of course, now they were closed, except this one. This one, the window was filled with a warm, inviting light. Candles twinkled in the distance, and laid out neatly, pair after pair after pair, were the most stunning vintage leather gloves she'd ever seen. Jane had always wanted a pair of leather gloves, but had never got round to getting one. She put one foot inside of the room, and as she did, a doorbell clattered above her, alerting whoever was in the store to her presence. She glanced at the door, looking for a timetable. It seemed unusual that this shop would be open so late. Out from a curtain stepped a small man, nondescript and non-offensive. "Hello there," he said. "Welcome to my leather shop." The smell had now begun to linger in the air and was beginning to fill Jane's nostrils. "You have very beautiful gloves," she said, sniffing at a beautiful pale green pear with a little bow attached. Are you looking for something in particular? She picked up a more rubbery glove and fiddled with it in her fingers. Well, I didn't have an intention. The glove maker stepped closer. Now out of the shadows she noticed he was quite handsome for a slightly more mature man. He glanced down at her hands. You have perfect hands, he said, with a slight whisper. Well, I don't think I do. He glanced at her again. You most certainly do. Taking one hand, he grasped it tightly and pulled it towards him. You most certainly do. These might be the most beautiful and perfectly formed fingers I have seen in such a long time. Something in the way he spoke gave Jane a little shudder. Gave her a sense that perhaps she should back towards the door. But as she glanced around, the door was already shut. She didn't remember closing it. Right, she said. Would you like to try some on? He asked. I'm not really sure if that's what I'm in the business for tonight, she said, once again stepping backwards. Only this time she tripped slightly over her feet and fell. As she did, she expected to hit the ground, but no, her bottom landed perfectly in a large wooden chair, sat by the closed door. As she tried to move, something seemed to rise up from the sides of the chair, grasping at her wrists and clamping them tightly to the chair. 2 leather buckles had pushed their way up and entwined themselves around her wrists, holding her firmly in place. What's happening? She said. I know I'm a bit drunk, but this feels very strange. Well, it seems, the glove maker said, you've been chosen. Chosen for what? She said. Only those with perfect hands are chosen for this. The glove maker walked closer. Jane heard the old wooden floorboards begin to creak as he stepped closer. The silence of the room seemed to echo around her ears. All she could hear was her heartbeat. What was happening? How drunk was she? Her eyes began to spin a little, and dizziness, nausea began to take over her. He stepped behind the chair, and there was a large creak as the chair was tilted backwards. Its back feet, on old metal wheels, clattered as he pushed her forward, pushing her behind the red velvet curtain that hung there. She smelt the old musky dust as she passed into the back room. Now, he said, taking out a huge tanning knife. Its massive long blade and huge wooden handle, he flicked it around in his hand. Now, what can we do for you? He said, pulling at a beautiful piece of brown leather. There must be something we can do with those perfect hands, he said. Jane was beginning to feel tired. Her eyes were dropping. The twinkly lights from the candles were beginning to make her feel dizzy and sleepy as she listened to the large knife tanning up and down, up and down the leather, gradually working its way end to end. Her eyes drifted as she watched the leather maker stretching the fabric, moving, contorting and twisting in the fabric. Her eyes began to drop even lower. She tried so hard to keep them awake. She really didn't want to end up on the end of that blade. Was tonight her last night on this earth, strapped to a wooden chair in the back of a glove shop. Her eyes got heavier and heavier as she listened to the sounds of the glove maker, cutting, stretching. There were moments when she closed her eyes and wondered, was he cutting her organs out of her body? And she simply couldn't stop it. Soon, Jane felt a warm and cozy sensation around her hands. Something comforting, she thought. Tight and fitting, but not restricting. Not harming her in any way. She felt the tugs, the pinches. She wiggled her fingers, her eyes still unable to open. All she could hear were the sounds that fluttered around her. Finally, unable to fight the need to sleep any longer, her eyelids dropped, and silence fell at last. Cold wind hit Jane's face and startled her. She opened her eyes. Was she dead? She looked around. Bright light seemed to be coming across some buildings as she squinted. There she was, sat in the doorway of the leather glove shop, scrumpled up in a little heap. She thought to herself, it was just a dream. I just couldn't find my way home last night. Perhaps now, with this early morning light, walk of shame, I'll still feel as terrible, but at least my bed will be waiting. Jane looked down. There, on her hands, were a set of beautiful, black, perfectly fitted leather gloves. A little note hung on one finger. They fit like a glove, it said. Jane looked around. The shop looked positively broken down, dishevelled, like it had never been opened, perhaps not for 20 years. She stood at the glass, staring inside, dark and hazy. Just a few old, scrappy gloves laid out, covered in dust, positively degrading. She looked up at the sign. The Glove Masters, Master of Gloves, was the name above the shop. The Glove Master, she thought to herself. She stood there for a moment or two, pondering what had happened last night. What on earth had she been drinking? And where did these stunningly beautiful, perfectly fitting gloves come from? Thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you have a very peaceful, spook-free night. And if you would like to see any more of my glove content, because I think some of you may have worked out by now that I am actually a glove goddess, and if you would like to see your goddess using her gloves in every sense of the manner, then you can join my OnlyFans page. There is a leather page particularly that is the one that you want. The medical page is lovely, but for this kind of content, you will want the leather OnlyFans page. So come join me there for daily fun. Honestly, I upload so much on the feed, as well as a little bit more spicy in your private messages. Wishing you a great day, my darling. Okay, I'm literally just keep coming back to give you more messages, but I wanted to let you know that in November, it's actually my birthday, and with the spook season being now, if you'd like to use my throne wish list, you could also perhaps purchase a pair of gloves that you might see in a new video. This time, I really am going. Happy spook season!